The one thing I haven't talked about yet is lighting. So what I'm thinking for lighting for these loft beds is underneath there's going to be a desk under each bed. So what I'm thinking is putting 2 recessed lights, just small ones, underneath their beds and doing a false ceiling on both. And then I'll wire it down to a switch on the wall on each side to control their own lights underneath their bed. In addition to that, I think on the front with the window, we talked about doing like decorative sconces. Ideally that they would turn on and off. We have this switch at the front of the room that's controlling this outlet. Kind of pointless. I hate switch outlets. Ideally, we would switch to control those 4 lights, to be determined. Lastly, I think I'm gonna add a reading light on each of their beds. So we'll have to go up in the attic and wire in a reading light on each side. Other than that, I think that's all the lighting that I'm gonna add. All right, back in the girls' room. We're switching gears today. Gonna do some electrical work. The electrician showed up today. So this was the switch outlet. The bottom of the outlet was constant power. The second was switched on and off by that switch up there. I'm not a big fan of switch outlets. It's very old school. So we're gonna just make this into a normal outlet, splice these all together, pigtail them in the back, and hook it up. So we've been doing some work up in the attic. Got power for each set of beds for the lights, spliced up top and then tied into my switch on the wall, which will control them. And then I'll just run another light in series with each of these. This 14 gauge, this is gonna be the power coming down. I'm gonna go underneath the bed. This is gonna service the 2 pot lights. I'm gonna fish it down to an outlet, or sorry, to the switch down there to control the lights. Yeah, pulling cable. Got the 14-2 cable ran for the little pot lights. The other cable going down is to our switch. Everything's all stapled up there and taped temporarily before I put the ceiling up. Then I'll drill the holes. So I got this 4x8 panel that I'm gonna use for the ceiling underneath the bed. I'm just gonna cut and rip it down to the proper size. Measure twice, cut once. All right, let's try to do this with one person. Nail guns, screws. I prefer to use nails because you won't be able to see them, but I don't know if it'll hold up this board. Here we go. Right in the middle of this one. Ow. Make sure you're always cognizant of putting fasteners up into the ceiling to make sure there's nothing above. I didn't use any stud guards, but my fasteners aren't long enough to reach the electrical cables. So both of our ceilings are up. Oh, that was a lot more sweat than expected. Got some bunch of nails and screws holding it up. Before we come back and paint, we will fill the holes and cover so we can paint over. Might do a little bit of crown molding or some decorative to kind of tie in the corners and the edges of this. 22. Thankfully, I had my spotter in today, making sure I drilled my holes right on center. I'm using this little dust catcher. When I drill my holes, it's coming in clutch so I don't spray dust everywhere. So these are very similar to the pot lights I use in my kitchen. They just have a couple knockouts. This part goes over the drywall or the ceiling. Has an adjustable warm versus bright light. And then you just screw it in. You just connect these and then you got your light. This snaps up onto the drywall and sits flush with the ceiling. Nice, so it comes with little push connectors that you can just strip back your wire and go ahead and push it in, and it'll create that connection. Only downside is I'm gonna have to pigtail three hots together, or two in this one. So I'm gonna have to not use it for one of my lights. So I'm gonna cut those off for now. Like this cable, I think it's 16 gauge. So 16 gauge stranded wire. There we go. So for stranded, you just want to like twist it nice and tight like a solid wire. So you got your hot to your light, your neutral, and then your ground. You know what I just realized is that you have two separate connections. They have 3 holes in here, so I could have used this. Got my wire exposed. Definitely made it harder on myself by not using these push connectors. Not a lot of room to work with in these things. We'll figure it out. Oh, food break. Get your hots and your neutrals. Time out. Oh, 14 gauge solid wire coming from our power source and then going out in series to the other light. Just find these little rubber tubes everywhere after doing all this. We don't have a lot of room in here to work with, so hopefully these fit. We're gonna do our neutrals, tighten these together. You could double check that, nice and tight. Try to loop it. Kind of looped it, put it in the back, and then we'll do our hots. Using a yellow wire nut here. Just make sure your wire nuts are rated for the amount of Romex that you are using. We're gonna loop this in there, tuck it in, nice and neat. Again, if you use those push connectors, you probably have a whole lot more room in here because these wire nuts are not small by any means. Got all our wires pigtailed together, tucked in there, ground, neutral, hot. We're gonna keep it at 3,000. Okay, be careful. Tuck this in. You might want to test it before you shove it up there, because getting it back out can be pretty difficult. All right, let's do our other one and then we'll fire them up. Disclaimer, I am not a licensed professional, so please proceed with caution. Always make sure you are double checking that your power is turned off at the main panel before doing any sort of electrical work. And then to connect your LED pot light, line up the arrows, and then this is your little locking nut, just so nothing gets pulled out. A little tight. Oh. Boom. Let's fire them up. All right, got our 2 3-inch pot lights installed. Here's the moment of truth. Wow. Got it on a dimmer. Not too bad. Now just gotta do the other side. So here's my switch underneath the bed for these pot lights. One thing I forgot to do is add my lights and outlet above the bed. So what I'm gonna do is pull the power from here to the top. So I'm gonna have one outlet up here to plug in devices and a reading light on both sides. Here you can see I already pulled this cable, one coming from underneath, and then this one just basically attaching these in series. So that's coming from that switch right there. So using this fishing tool, I'm basically gonna just pull that cable from underneath. All right, got my old work boxes mounted on each side of the bed. Now just a matter of hooking up my fixtures and my outlets. You always want to make sure that your receptacle and fixtures are rated for the amount of amperage that your circuit is carrying. For my situation, it's a 15 amp circuit, so I'm using 15 amp devices. Also why I'm using 14 gauge Romex. And some little adjustments to the fixture. Sometimes I don't know why I do the things that I do. Somewhere in between the chaos of this project, I decided to install some LED strips. They're gonna go behind the 2 flower boxes in front of the window and then also in the back wall. Went into a little bit of a rabbit hole on this, so bear with me. This right here is a low voltage driver. It converts AC to DC low voltage, 12 volts. Pretend this is my dimmer switch. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hardwire from my dimmer switch in the bedroom over to the driver, convert that to low voltage. That low voltage DC is gonna go into the controller. This controller will be controlled by either a remote or via the app. This is gonna go out to our 3 different locations of LED lights using this thermostat cable that has 6 conductors similar to this guy. And then these 3 are gonna be wired into their designated areas and then attached to the LED strip at the end. This is a pretty high quality LED strip. It's RGB CCT, so it does color and different brightnesses of white at different Kelvin. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. This is our wall remote that we're gonna probably mount in the front of the room so the girls can control it. These are our 6 conductors. So we got red, green, blue, white, and then 2 whites, so a yellow and a white. Those are the 2 tones of white. And then we have our black power. Hopefully I don't run everything and then it doesn't work. So I guess we'll figure that out. I'll spare you the nonsense of all the work that was done in the attic and all the splicing of the wire and all the boring stuff. I did make a little short video kind of going through the work that was done up above to run the cable for these LED strips. But basically what we have now is this low voltage wire ready to connect our LED strip at the front of this bed. As you can see, Charlotte's already sleeping up here. It's also spliced back in here, going back to the back wall. On the back wall, I think what we're gonna do is have some sort of rainbow or wood kind of art piece that's going to be lit up from behind. Just an extra accent nightlight piece that probably it's going to take up a little more time than it should. And then lastly, we have our low voltage wires that are going to connect the LED strip on Olivia's bed. So like I said before, these are all going to be controlled by this light switch at the front of the room. That driver is compatible with a dimmer switch, but because you could dim the lights with the remote that I'm gonna mount right here, I don't know if it's necessary to really put a dimmer switch. So yeah, now it's just a matter of hooking up the actual LED strips, cutting them to length, and I gotta finish the rest of this stuff before then. So just a quick recap of our electrical and lighting work. We have our reading lights on each side. These are controlled individually. Have our outlet for each of them underneath. Underneath the beds, we have the 2 pot lights that are controlled by our individual dimmer switches. And then lastly, we have our low voltage RAN for the LED strips that are gonna go in front of each bed and at the top of the stairs. Enough of the electrical nonsense. Let's get back to cutting some wood.